The fluorescent lights of the office hummed with a low, annoying buzz that seemed to drill straight into people's skulls. It was a Tuesday morning, and the air inside the glass building of Viridia Logistics was stale, recycled and smelling faintly of burnt coffee and expensive perfume. Outside, the city was waking up. Horns honking and people rushing, but inside, everything was a blur of gray suits and clicking keyboards in the far corner of the room. Squeezed between a loud copier machine and a filing cabinet that rattled every time someone slammed a door, sat Maya. She was 22 years old, fresh out of university and trying her best to look invisible. She wasn't wearing a tailored blazer or shoes that clicked confidently on the floor. Instead, she wore a simple beige cardigan over a white shirt and flat shoes that made no sound at all. She looked like someone who belonged in a library, not in a high-stakes logistics firm. Maya adjusted her glasses and stared at the screen in front of her. Her job title was administrative assistant, but she was quickly learning that in this office, assistant was just another word for doormat. She had only been there for 3 days. In those 3 days, she had learned where the coffee machine was, how to fix the paper jam, and exactly which executives took their sugar with cream and which took it black. But mostly, she had learned about the hierarchy. And at the top of the food chain in this specific department was Greg. Greg didn't walk. He strutted. He was a man who commanded space, his voice always a few decibels louder than everyone else's. He believed the company revolved around him. And unfortunately, everyone around him acted like it did. He had a group of followers, 3 other employees who laughed a little too hard at his jokes and nodded a little too vigorously at his ideas. They were his court, and he was their king. At 11 o'clock, the office door swung open. Greg marched in, holding a cup of iced coffee, with his entourage trailing behind him. They were laughing about something, their voices cutting through the quiet concentration of the room. "I'm telling you, the client doesn't know what he wants," Greg boomed, leaning against the partition near Maya's desk. "I had to explain the numbers 3 times. It's exhausting being the only one with a brain around here." One of his colleagues, a woman named Brenda who wore bright red lipstick, giggled. "Oh, Greg, you're a saint for dealing with them?" "I don't know how you do it." Maya kept her head down. She was typing names into a spreadsheet, her fingers moving slowly but carefully. She didn't want to be part of the conversation. She just wanted to do her job and go home. But her silence seemed to annoy Greg. He didn't like people who didn't look at him. He interpreted quietness as stupidity, or worse, arrogance. Greg looked down at the small desk. He looked at Maya's simple lunchbox, a Tupperware container with a sandwich and an apple sitting on the corner. He let out a loud, exaggerated sigh. "Is it me, or is it getting a little cramped in here?" Greg asked, looking around. "It's fine, Greg," Brenda said. "No, seriously," Greg said, turning his attention directly to Maya. He tapped his knuckles on her desk, hard. The sound made Maya jump slightly. "Hey, you." Maya stopped typing. She looked up, her eyes wide behind her glasses. "Me, yes, you. You're blocking the flow. You've got all this stuff here," Greg gestured vaguely at her stack of files. "Can't you move it somewhere else? Maybe to the storage room in the basement." Maya looked at her computer. She couldn't move the computer. "I was told to sit here by HR. I need to use the outlet." Greg rolled his eyes dramatically, looking back at his friends. "See, this is what I'm talking about. They hire these kids right out of school, and they have 0 common sense. It's like talking to a wall." The others chuckled. It wasn't a real laugh. It was the laugh people do when they are afraid of being the target themselves. "I'm sorry," Maya said softly. "I'll try to keep the area clear. You do that?" Greg said, smirking. "And maybe next time, don't wear the grandma cardigan. It's depressing the whole team. We need energy here, not nap time vibes." The group moved away, snickering among themselves. Maya felt the heat rise in her cheeks. She pulled the sleeves of her cardigan down over her hands, trying to hide. She didn't understand why they had to be so mean. She hadn't done anything to them. She was just trying to work. Over the next hour, the small annoyances turned into active bullying. It wasn't enough for them to ignore her. They needed to make her life difficult. First, Brenda came by. Hey, I need you to fax these. Now. She dumped a stack of about 50 pages onto Maya's keyboard. But these are sensitive, so don't mess it up. I need them sent before my meeting in 10 minutes. I have a deadline for this spreadsheet. Maya started to say, "Excuse me?" Brenda snapped, putting a hand on her hip. Are you saying you can't do a simple task? Because Greg said you were struggling with basic instructions. No, I can do it, Maya said quickly. She didn't want to fight. Maya stood up and went to the fax machine. Of course it was out of paper. She had to fumble around in the drawers to find more, all while feeling Brenda's eyes burning into her back. When she finally got the machine working, the paper jammed halfway through. By the time she fixed it, Brenda was storming over. Unbelievable, Brenda huffed, snatching the papers back. I'll just do it myself. Clearly, this is too complicated for you. Maya sat back down, her heart pounding. She took a deep breath. Just ignore it, she told herself. Asterisk, it's just a temp job. It will be over soon. Asterisk, but the lunch break brought a fresh wave of humiliation. In most offices, lunch is a break. At Viridia, it was another battlefield. Maya sat in the small break room, opening her Tupperware. She took a bite of her sandwich. It was just cheese and lettuce, nothing fancy, but she had made it herself. Greg and his friends walked in. They ordered expensive takeout from the place down the street, the smell of spicy curry and garlic wafting through the room. They sat at the large table, forcing Maya to move her water bottle to make room. So, Greg said, his voice echoing in the small room. I saw the new roster. We're getting assigned a team lead for the summer project. Who is it? Someone asked. I don't know yet, Greg said. Hopefully, it's not someone we have to train from scratch. I swear, the interns they hire nowadays look like they just rolled out of bed. Look at this. He pointed his plastic fork toward Maya. Maya froze, her sandwich halfway to her mouth. Look at the shoes, Greg said to the table, but loud enough for her to hear. Scuffed cheap, probably from a thrift store. And look at the way she eats. So, quiet. It's weird, right? Maybe she's mute, Brenda joked. Maybe she's just simple, Greg added. You know, not cut out for the corporate world. Some people are just meant to stay in the background. The table erupted in laughter. Maya's face felt like it was on fire. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. She grabbed her trash and her water bottle and walked out without a word. She could hear them still laughing as the door closed behind her. She went into the bathroom and locked the stall. She leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. She felt tears pricking at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. They wanted her to cry. They wanted her to feel small. Maya looked at herself in the small mirror on the back of the door. She saw a young woman in a beige cardigan. She didn't look scary. She didn't look powerful. She looked like exactly what Greg called her, simple. But as she washed her hands with cold water, drying them on the rough brown paper towels, a calm feeling settled over her. She remembered why she was there. It wasn't for the money. She didn't need the paycheck. She was there because she had to be. Her grandfather had built this company from nothing but a truck and a dream. He had passed away 6 months ago, leaving everything to her. He had always told her, Asterisk Maya, to know a kingdom, you must walk among the villagers. Asterisk he had warned her that the company had grown cold. He had worried that the people at the top had forgotten the values he built it on. He had asked her to go see for herself. It's a low job he had written in his last letter to her. Don't tell anyone who you are. See the truth? Then, decide what to do. Young Maya took a deep breath. The bullying wasn't nice. It was cruel and unfair. But it was also data. It showed her exactly who Greg was. It showed her that the culture was rotting from the inside. She looked in the mirror again. This time, she didn't look away. She fixed her hair, smoothed down her cardigan, and unlocked the bathroom door. She walked back into the main office. Greg was still at lunch, but Brenda was at her desk. Maya sat down at her own computer. She opened the folder she had been working on. It wasn't just the spreadsheet of names. Over the last 3 days, while everyone was laughing and ignoring her, Maya had been listening. She had been watching. She knew that Greg overcharged clients for rush fees and then pocketed the difference. She knew that Brenda was fudging her hours. She knew the copier was broken because no one had called maintenance. Even though the budget allowed for it, she opened a new document. A hidden file on her desktop she had named Notes. She typed a few sentences. Asterisk Greg. Hostile to junior staff. Suspicious accounting practices on client X22 creates toxic environment. Asterisk. Brenda. Complicit behavior. Inefficiency. Asterisk. She saved the file. She closed it. When Greg came back from lunch, he threw his empty cup into the trash can near Maya's desk. It missed and landed on the floor, splashing ice cubes and sticky brown liquid onto her shoes. What? Oops, he said, not even looking down. Clean that up, will you? Make yourself useful. He walked away, laughing on his phone. Maya looked at the mess. She looked at the sticky puddle on her cheap, scuffed shoes. She didn't feel angry anymore. She felt focused. She reached down, grabbed a handful of paper towels, and cleaned the floor. She cleaned her shoes. She sat back up, straightened her back, and went back to work. They thought she was just a simple girl with no future. They thought she was nobody. They didn't know that she was the one signing the checks. They didn't know that the simple woman in the corner was actually the owner of the building they were standing in. Maya typed faster now. She wasn't just an assistant anymore. She was a judge, and the trial had just begun. The office buzzed on around her, unaware that the quietest person in the room was the one they should have been afraid of. The bullying didn't stop after the incident with the spilled coffee. In fact, it got worse. It was as if Greg and his group had decided that making Maya uncomfortable wasn't enough anymore. Now, they wanted to break her spirit completely. The office, which had once just felt busy, now felt hostile. Every time Maya walked to the printer, she could feel eyes on her, followed by whispers and giggles that stopped the moment she turned around. It started with small things. Her desk chair was adjusted so low that her knees hit the underside of the desk. Her stapler went missing for 3 days, only to reappear in the men's restroom. But the worst part was the workload. Greg had realized that Maya never said no. She was terrified of losing her job, so she accepted every task thrown at her, no matter how unreasonable. One rainy Tuesday, the office was packed with deadlines. Everyone was stressed, running around with papers and shouting into phones. Maya was trying to focus on a complex set of files for the accounting department, a task she had actually been assigned by the HR manager. But Greg had other plans. He swaggered over to her desk, got a cup of steaming soup in one hand and a thick stack of files in the other. He didn't ask if she was busy. He just dropped the files on top of the ones she was working on, making a loud thud. I need these photocopied, collated, and bound by 2 o'clock, Greg said, blowing on his soup to cool it down. And don't use the cheap binding spines. Use the good ones from the supply closet. The ones Brenda likes. Maya looked at the clock. It was already 1:30. I have to finish this report for HR, Greg. They said it's urgent. Greg let out a sigh, shaking his head like a disappointed parent. Listen to me. HR's reports are boring. My client meeting is important. This is the difference between a nobody and a somebody in this company. You want to learn? You learn by doing the work that matters. Brenda, who was walking by with a stack of magazines, stopped to chime in. Honestly, Maya, we are trying to help you get some experience. If you just make copies all day, you'll never learn how the business actually runs. Stop being so selfish. Maya bit the inside of her cheek. The word selfish hurt. She was the least selfish person in the room. She was doing her job and theirs. But she knew arguing wouldn't work. If she said no, Greg would just go to the manager and lie, saying she refused to work. Then she would be fired before she finished her investigation. Okay, Maya whispered. I'll do it. Good girl, Greg said, patting her on the head like a dog. Maya's hand shook as she picked up the heavy stack of files. She walked to the copier room, which was small and windowless. She spent the next hour and a half copying, sorting, and binding. The machine was hot and loud. Her back ached from standing up. By the time she finished, it was 2:10. She rushed to Greg's office with the documents. He was on the phone, laughing loudly. He looked at the clock, then at her. "You're late." "I'm sorry," Maya said. "The copier jammed and—" "I don't want excuses," he snapped, taking the papers without looking at her. "If this client loses interest because of the delay, that's on you." He slammed the door in her face. Maya walked back to her desk, feeling a heavy lump in her throat. She sat down and realized she hadn't even eaten lunch. Her sandwich was still in her bag, probably squashed flat by now. She looked around the office. Everyone seemed to be in their own world. No one cared about the quiet girl in the corner. But as Maya sat there, wiping a tear from her eye before anyone could see, she heard a noise. It was a faint beep from the computer in the empty cubicle next to hers. The person who used to sit there had been laid off months ago, but the computer was still on. Curious, Maya leaned over. The screen was open to an email draft that hadn't been sent. It was a budget report from the marketing department. She wasn't trying to snoop, but her eyes caught a line of numbers that didn't make sense. The budget for client transportation was huge. It was double what it should have been for a company that mostly shipped products by trucks they already owned. Maya was good at math. It was something she inherited from her grandfather. She remembered the numbers she had seen in the archive she had organized last week. The truck maintenance costs were low, almost non-existent. But the outsourced transport costs were through the roof. It didn't add up. If they owned the trucks, why were they paying so much money to outside drivers? Maya pulled out her notebook. She started writing down the numbers she saw on the screen. She realized something else. The approvals for these outside payments were signed by Greg. The office started to empty out as 5 o'clock approached. Greg and his group usually left early, claiming they had client meetings at the golf course or the bar. Today was no different. Greg put on his expensive coat and walked by Maya's desk. "Try not to burn the place down while we're gone," he joked. "Have a good evening." "Greg," Maya replied, her voice steady. He didn't reply. Just walked out with Brenda and the others. As soon as the coast was clear, Maya's demeanor changed. The scared, hunched girl disappeared. She sat up straight. She looked at the clock on the wall. She had at least 2 hours before the security guard came by to lock the doors properly. She didn't go home. Instead, Maya logged into the main server using the generic login code she had been given. She didn't have access to the sensitive financial files, but she knew that people in the office were lazy with their passwords. She had watched Greg type his in enough times. It was just his name and the year he graduated. She looked around nervously, her heart beating fast. If she got caught, she could be arrested for trespassing or hacking. But she had to know. She typed Greg 2023. Access denied. She frowned. Maybe he changed it. She tried viridiaking. Access granted. Maya let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She was in. She opened his folders. She didn't look at his emails that felt too personal. But she went straight to the expense reports and project budgets. What she found made her blood run cold. It wasn't just about being mean. It wasn't just about bullying a girl in a cheap cardigan. Greg was stealing from the company. He was creating fake invoices for a trucking company that didn't exist. He was charging Viridia for thousands of miles of driving that never happened. And he was hiding the money by moving it around different accounts to make it look like marketing costs. The total amount was staggering. It was hundreds of thousands of dollars over the last year alone. Maya read on, her eyes scanning the screen rapidly. She found emails between Greg and an external account, threatening to expose secrets if Greg didn't pay up. It looked like blackmail, or maybe it was just a partner in crime. Either way, it was a mess. And then she saw her own name. In a note titled Staff Review, Greg had written about her. Asterisk temp is useless. Too quiet. Suspect she is slow. Planning to phase her out next week. We'll blame the lost files on her. Asterisk Maya stared at the screen. He was going to fire her. He was going to frame her for his own mess. He thought she was so stupid that she wouldn't even fight back. A slow anger built up inside her. It wasn't the hot, angry feeling of wanting to scream. It was a cold, hard feeling, like steel. She realized then that Greg wasn't just a bully. He was a bad person, and he was destroying her grandfather's company. Maya grabbed her phone. She didn't take photos of the screen. That was too risky. Instead, she opened her bag and took out a small notepad. She began to write down everything. The account numbers, the dates, the fake company names. She wrote as fast as she could, her handwriting neat and precise. She spent an hour copying the evidence. Suddenly, she heard a noise at the front of the office. The main door beeped. Maya froze. She quickly logged out of Greg's computer and shut the monitor off. She shoved her notebook into her bag and grabbed a stack of random papers, pretending to work. She peeked over her cubicle wall. It was the cleaning lady, Mrs. Leo, who came in every evening to vacuum. Mrs. Leo. Lou saw Maya and smiled, waving her feather duster. "You work too late, little one," Mrs. Lou said in her thick accent. "Go home. Rest." "Almost done," Maya said, forcing a smile. "Just finishing up some filing." Maya waited until Mrs. Liu went to the break room. Then she packed her bag. She had what she needed. She had enough proof to start looking deeper. She couldn't do anything tonight, but she had the ammunition. She walked out of the office building into the cool night air. The city was loud, but Maya felt a strange sense of peace. The fear she felt that morning was gone. She knew what Greg was now. She knew his weakness. She hailed a taxi, not the bus she usually took. She was too tired for the bus. When the driver asked where she wanted to go, she gave an address on the other side of town. It was a fancy high-rise apartment building, not the tiny student apartment everyone thought she lived in. The taxi driver looked at her simple, clothes in the rearview mirror. "You sure, miss? That place is expensive." "I'm sure," Maya said firmly. She leaned back against the seat. She touched the notepad in her bag. She thought about her grandfather. He had taught her that knowledge was power. Today, she had learned a lot. She had learned that the bullies at the office were lazy, arrogant, and corrupt. They thought they were untouchable. Maya looked out the window at the lights of the city flashing by. They underestimated her because she was young. They underestimated her because she was quiet. They underestimated her because she was kind. But tomorrow was another day. And tomorrow, the game would change. She wasn't just going to file papers anymore. She was going to set a trap. She arrived at the high-rise and went to the penthouse. As she unlocked the heavy door, she took off her cardigan and hung it up. She walked to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked out over the city. From up here, the people looked like ants. From up here, Greg and his bullying were just tiny specks of dust. She took out her phone and dialed a number. "Hi, it's me," she said to the person on the other end. "I found what we were looking for." "Yes, it's bad. I need you to call the board members. Set up the meeting for Friday." She paused, listening to the voice on the phone. "No," she said, a small, determined smile forming on her lips. "I don't want to be anonymous anymore. I'm going to introduce myself." She hung up the phone. The simple girl from the archives was gone. The owner had arrived. Asterisk, the next morning. The office felt different to Maya. It was the same gray walls, the same buzzing lights, and the same smell of stale coffee. But the air felt charged to her. She walked in carrying her usual packed lunch and wearing her simple beige cardigan, but her backpack felt heavier. Inside, it was the notebook full of evidence, tucked safely between her lunchbox and a worn-out novel. She knew things now. Secrets that made the room feel smaller and the people in it look smaller. Greg arrived late, as usual, swaggering in with a coffee in one hand and his phone in the other. He didn't look at Maya. He was too busy shouting into his phone about a deal he was supposedly closing. Maya sat at her desk, her hands resting on the keyboard. She wasn't typing. She was waiting. Around mid-morning, the email pinged in her inbox. It was from the legal department. It was the notice she had been waiting for, the final approval for the external audit. The company had to review all its financial records for the tax year. It was a routine thing, but Maya knew it was the trigger. She had requested this specific audit through a back channel she had access to. Using a name no one in this office knew, she opened the email, printed it, and quietly placed a copy in the tray that went to Greg's desk. She knew he wouldn't read it. He never read paperwork from legal. He just signed it or passed it to Brenda to deal with. That was the plan. Later that afternoon, Greg finally picked up the stack of papers from his tray. He flipped through them, grunting with boredom. When he saw the audit notice, he froze for a split second. It was a tiny movement, just a twitch in his jaw, but Maya saw it because she was watching. She watched him look up at the ceiling, then scan the room until his eyes landed on her. He stood up and walked over to her desk. His shadow fell over her computer. "You sent this to my desk?" he asked, holding up the audit paper. Maya looked up, keeping her face blank. "It came from the distribution list, Greg. I just processed the mail." He leaned down, putting his hands on her desk, invading her space. "There's a specific request in here about the transport and logistics accounts. That's my department." "Why are they looking at that?" "I don't know," Maya said softly. "Maybe because it's a big part of the company." Greg stared at her, his eyes narrow. For the first time, he looked a little unsure. He realized he didn't know anything about her. She was just the quiet temp who never caused trouble. But suddenly, she felt like a wild card. "Just stay away from my files, understand?" He hissed. "You don't know what you're doing." "You stick to filing," Maya said. He walked away, but he didn't go back to his desk. He went to Brenda's. They whispered furiously. Maya saw Brenda look over at her with a look of disdain that had turned into suspicion. The game was getting tighter. The next few days were a tense waiting game. Maya watched Greg panic. She saw him staying late, furiously typing on his computer. She saw him shredding papers, something he never did before. He was trying to cover his tracks, but he was too late. The audit system was already locked in. The digital footprint of the fake invoices was already saved on servers he couldn't touch. On Thursday, the office atmosphere was toxic. Greg was snapping at everyone. He yelled at the delivery guy. He threw a stapler at the wall when it jammed. The stress was getting to him. He knew that if the auditors looked closely at the transport accounts, they would see that the money for the fake trucking company was going into a personal account. Maya felt a strange sense of calm as she watched him self-destruct. She continued her work, answering phones and filing papers. She even helped Mrs. Liu, the cleaning lady, pick up some papers Greg had thrown on the floor in a fit of rage. "Boss man having bad day," Mrs. Liu whispered to Maya. "Something like that," Maya replied. Friday morning arrived. This was the day. The auditors were scheduled to arrive at 2 p.m. to collect the physical files. Greg had a plan. Maya saw him log onto her computer early in the morning before she arrived. When Maya sat down at her desk and turned her screen on, she immediately noticed something was wrong. The main project folder she had been working on for weeks, the one containing the client data for the summer project, was gone. She searched for it. Empty. Then she looked in the recycle bin. Empty. Panic flared in her chest for a second. But then she realized what he had done. He had deleted her files. He was going to blame her for losing the data right before the auditors came. He was going to create a chaotic scene to distract everyone from his own theft. He was going to say the stupid temp had pressed the wrong button. Maya didn't scream. She didn't cry. She checked her backup drive. She had learned early on, after her chair had been adjusted and her stapler stolen, that she couldn't trust this place. She had backed up every single file onto a small hard drive she kept in her pocket every day. She had the files. He didn't know she had them. At 1:30 p.m., Greg called a loud team meeting in the break room. He wanted everyone there except Maya. She could hear them through the thin walls. He was hyping them up, talking about how they were going to crush the summer targets. He was building up his ego before he brought it down. The auditors arrived exactly at 2 p.m. They were two serious-looking men in sharp suits. They walked to the front desk and asked for the project manager. Greg came out of the break room, smiling his fake, charming smile. "Gentlemen," Greg said, shaking their hands. "Welcome. I'm Greg, the senior manager here. We are ready for you." Just then, Maya stood up. She walked over to the group, clutching her hard drive. "Excuse me," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried in the sudden silence of the main office. Greg turned, his face twisting into a scowl. This doesn't concern you. Go back to your desk. Actually, one of the auditors said, looking at his clipboard. We have a request to also review the administrative logs and the digital backups from the temp station. Maya, is it? Greg's face went pale. What? Why? She's nobody. She just files papers. Maya looked at Greg, then at the auditors. I believe there has been a data breach, sir. I came in this morning, and all the files for the current project were deleted from the main server. What? Greg shouted. That's a lie. She deleted them. I told you she was incompetent. Maya pulled the hard drive from her pocket. I anticipated that there might be technical issues, she said, her voice steady and strong. I have the complete backup of every file I've worked on, including the original invoices for the transport department that were archived last month. She handed the hard drive to the auditor. I also noticed some discrepancies in the transport logs that I thought you might want to see. Specifically, the payments made to G&H Transport on the 15th of every month. The auditor took the drive. G&H Transport. That's not on our approved vendor list. No, Maya said, looking Greg right in the eye. It's not. Greg took a step back, his hands trembling. The room was deadly silent. Brenda's mouth was hanging open. The rest of the employees were watching wide-eyed. They could sense that something huge was happening. The air was shifting. The power was moving. You little. Greg stammered, his face turning red. You stole company data? You're fired. I'm calling security. He turned and ran back to his office, likely to try and delete the original incriminating files from his computer or grab his personal things. Maya stood still, watching him go. She didn't chase him. She didn't need to. Asterisk. The auditor plugged the hard drive into a laptop he had brought with him. He typed for a few seconds, then his eyes widened. He looked at his partner. They exchanged a look of shock. It was worse than they thought. It wasn't just a few missing dollars. It was a massive fraud scheme. The auditor looked at Maya with new respect. Miss, did you compile these notes yourself? Yes, Maya said. I noticed the numbers didn't match the truck logs. Greg came running back out of his office holding his briefcase. He tried to push past the auditors to get to the elevators. I'm leaving. This is a setup. Sir, you need to stay here, the auditor said firmly. Get out of my way. Greg yelled. He shoved past Maya, knocking her shoulder hard. But he didn't get far. The security guards, who had been alerted by the auditors upon arrival, were already at the elevator doors. They blocked Greg's path. The big boss, Mr. Henderson. The regional director, who usually stayed in his ivory tower on the top floor, stepped out of the elevator just as Greg tried to run out. Mr. Henderson looked at the chaos. He saw the auditors, the terrified employees, and Maya standing calmly in the center of the storm, holding her notebook. What is going on here? Mr. Henderson demanded. Greg pointed a shaking finger at Maya. She's crazy. She stole files. She's trying to destroy me. Maya stepped forward. She reached into her bag and pulled out the final thing she needed, her ID card. But not the temp ID card. She turned it over so only Mr. Henderson could see the gold logo on the back, or maybe she just pulled out an envelope she had been saving. Mr. Henderson, Maya said, her voice echoing in the room. I'm not stealing files. I'm submitting my final report on the workplace culture and financial status of this branch. My name is Maya Sterling, and I believe we have a lot to discuss about Greg's employment. The room gasped. A collective whisper went through the room. Sterling. Like the owner? Mr. Henderson's jaw dropped. He knew the name. He knew the young woman he had been told was coming to visit someday, disguised. He looked from the simple girl in the cardigan to the panicked man trying to escape. It didn't take a genius to figure out who was telling the truth. Arrest him, Mr. Henderson said to the security guards, pointing at Greg. Call the police. We have a thief. Greg slumped against the wall, defeated. The bully had been cornered by the quietest girl in the room. Maya stood tall. She wasn't hiding anymore. Asterisk, the silence that followed Mr. Henderson's command was heavy. Pressing down on the room like a thick blanket, no one moved. The air conditioning seemed to hum louder than usual. Greg was still slumped against the wall, his face pale and sweaty, looking from the security guards to Maya as if he were seeing a ghost. The man who had strutted around the office like a king for years suddenly looked very small and very fragile. Maya stood perfectly still, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She was terrified, but she didn't show it. She kept her shoulders back and her head high. This was the moment she had prepared for, but actually living it was different than imagining it in her apartment late at night. She could feel every eye in the room boring into her. The whispers were starting already, a low murmur rippling through the cubicles like wind through dry grass. "Sterling?" Someone whispered from the back. "As in the Sterling family?" "Arrest him," Mr. Henderson repeated, his voice cutting through the noise. The two security guards stepped forward. They didn't grab Greg roughly, but they didn't need to. He offered no resistance. He seemed to have melted, the fight drained out of him completely. He simply nodded and walked toward the elevator, surrounded by the guards. As the elevator doors slid shut, hiding him from view, the entire room let out a breath they didn't know they were holding. Mr. Henderson turned his attention to Maya. He was a tall man with gray hair and a stern face. But the way he looked at her now wasn't stern. It was shocked, bordering on awestruck. He smoothed his tie and walked over to her desk, extending a hand. I wasn't expecting you to be here like this." Maya shook his hand. His grip was firm and professional. "I needed to see the truth, Mr. Henderson. Reports don't tell you everything." "No," he said, looking around the messy office. "I suppose they don't." The rest of the employees were staring openly now. Brenda was standing near the copier, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. She looked at the cheap cardigan Maya was wearing, then at the expensive watch on Mr. Henderson's wrist. The pieces were sliding into place for her, and the realization was written all over her face. The girl she had mocked, the girl she had ordered to fetch coffee and bind papers, was the one signing the paychecks. "Everyone," Mr. Henderson said, raising his voice. "I want all department heads in the main conference room in 5 minutes. Everyone else, please return to your stations. We have a lot to discuss." The scramble began. People jumped up, rushing to fix their hair and grab notepads. It was chaotic. Phones started ringing again, but the mood was different. The lazy, careless atmosphere was gone, replaced by a sharp tension. Maya walked toward the conference room. She wasn't walking behind anyone this time. She wasn't carrying anyone's coffee. She walked at the front with Mr. Henderson by her side. As she passed Brenda's desk, she stopped for a fraction of a second. She didn't say anything. She just looked at Brenda. It was a calm, level look. Brenda shrank back into her chair, averting her eyes. The power dynamic had flipped so fast it made people dizzy. Inside the conference room, the long mahogany table was usually where Greg held court. Today, it felt different. Maya took the seat at the head of the table, the chair Greg used to sit in. It was leather and high-backed. It felt strange to sit in it, like wearing someone else's shoes. But she leaned forward, placing her hands on the polished wood. Mr. Henderson stood at the other end, acting as a moderator. First of all, he began, looking at the gathered managers. "Miss Sterling is the rightful owner of this company. She has been working among you for the past month as an administrative assistant. The reason for this was to evaluate the operational integrity of this branch." There were murmurs of surprise and a few uncomfortable shifts in seats. The people who had ignored Maya or treated her poorly were now sweating. "Unfortunately," Mr. Henderson continued, "the evaluation has revealed some serious issues. We have already detained Greg for embezzlement and fraud. But the problems go deeper than one person." She reached into her bag and pulled out her notebook. It was the same simple notebook she had been using to track the bullying and the fake numbers. She opened it to a fresh page. "I'm not going to fire everyone," Maya said. Her voice was clear, but not loud. She didn't need to shout to be heard anymore. "I know that Greg ruled this place with fear. I know that many of you went along with it because you were scared of losing your jobs. I understand fear. But fear makes us do things we know are wrong." She looked around the room. She saw a young man named David from the IT department. He had never been mean to her, but he had never helped her either. he had just looked the other way. She saw Brenda and the other clique members, who were currently trying to make themselves invisible behind their laptops. "This company was built on hard work and respect," Maya said. "My grandfather didn't build this empire by cheating clients or bullying secretaries. He built it by caring about the details and caring about the people. We have lost that way." She picked up a stack of papers she had printed earlier. "I have here a list of observations, not just about the fraud, but about the culture. I saw people who come in late and leave early. I saw people who spend hours gossiping instead of working. I saw a toxic environment where new hires are hazed instead of trained." The room was deadly quiet. You could hear a pin drop. "It changes today," Maya said firmly. "Effective immediately, I am taking over as the active manager of this branch until a full review is complete. We will be auditing every department. We will be checking every expense report." She looked directly at Brenda. "And we will be implementing a zero-tolerance policy for harassment. If you are found bullying a colleague, regardless of their position, you will be let go. No warnings. No second chances." Brenda looked like she was going to be sick. She opened her mouth to speak, maybe to apologize, maybe to make an excuse. But Maya raised a hand to stop her. "I don't want apologies," Maya said. "I want change. I want this to be a place where people are proud to work, not a place where they are afraid to speak." She sat back down. "Now, let's talk about the summer project." Greg left a mess. "We have a client expecting a presentation on Monday. I know the numbers. I've been fixing the files Greg deleted for the last week. We can do this, but we have to work together. Who is with me?" For a moment, nobody moved. The old habits of fear were hard to break. They were waiting for the catch, waiting for the punchline. Then, David from IT raised his hand. He stood up slowly. "Wait. I noticed the discrepancies in the server logs a while ago," he said, his voice shaking a little. "I didn't say anything because Greg said he'd fire me, but I know where the backup drives are. I can help restore the data." Maya smiled. It was a genuine smile. "Thank you, David." After that, the ice broke. One by one, the other managers started to speak up. They admitted they knew things weren't right, but felt helpless. They offered ideas. They offered support. The atmosphere in the room transformed from a funeral to a war room. The energy shifted from hiding mistakes to fixing problems. They worked late into the night. There was no ordering pizza and laughing like they used to when Greg was in charge. There was focused, intense work. Maya sat at the head of the table, leading the meeting. She asked questions. She listened. She was tough, but she was fair. When someone made a mistake, she didn't yell. She just asked, "How do we fix it?" Around 8 o'clock, Mr. Henderson stepped out to take a call. When he came back, he had a suit bag over his arm. "I took the liberty of having this brought from the executive suite," he said to Maya, placing the bag on the chair next to her. "I think you've earned the right to stop wearing the disguise." Maya looked at the bag, then down at her beige cardigan. She realized she was still wearing the simple woman uniform. She had been so focused on the work she hadn't even thought about her clothes. The cardigan felt like a costume now, a skin she had shed. "Thank you," she said. She went to the bathroom and changed. When she came back, she was wearing a tailored navy blue blazer and a crisp white shirt. She had pulled her hair back into a sleek clip. She looked professional, confident, and undeniably in charge. When she walked back into the conference room, the conversation stopped for a second. It wasn't just the owner in the room anymore. It was a leader. By midnight, they had a plan. They had recovered the data. They had a strategy to present to the client that admitted the previous delays, but offered a new, transparent timeline. It was honest. As the meeting started to break up, the employees filtered out, exhausted, but strangely energized. They nodded to Maya as they left, murmuring good night and thank you. Maya stayed behind, tidying up the papers on the table. She looked out the window at the city lights. It was the same view Greg had looked at 1,000 times, but it looked different to her. She didn't see a kingdom to rule. She saw a responsibility. Mr. Henderson walked up behind her. "You did well today, Maya. Better than I expected." "It's not over yet," she said, turning to face him. Tomorrow, we have to fire a few more people who were too deep in Greg's circle. And then we have to actually run this company the right way? We will, Henderson said. We will. Maya picked up her old cardigan from where she had left it on the chair. She folded it neatly. She wasn't going to throw it away. She wanted to keep it. She wanted to remember where she came from. She wanted to remember how it felt to be the person in the corner. The person everyone underestimated. She walked out of the conference room, turning off the lights. The office was dark and quiet. The hum of the copier was gone. The bullying was gone. She walked past the cubicles, past the desk where she used to sit and hide. She stopped at Brenda's desk. There was a framed picture of Brenda's family on it. Maya looked at it for a long moment. She knew that tomorrow, Brenda would be called into HR and let go. It wasn't personal, but it was necessary. You couldn't build a clean house with dirty bricks. Maya sighed, a heavy human sound. Being the boss wasn't just about power. It was about making hard choices that affected people's lives. It was lonely at the top, but as she walked to the elevator, she felt stronger than she ever had before. She pressed the button for the lobby. The elevator doors opened, and she stepped in, leaving the old office behind, ready to start the new one. The sun was bright and harsh on Monday morning, shining through the glass walls of the office, exposing every speck of dust on the floor. The atmosphere in the room was different. It wasn't just quiet. It was attentive. When Maya walked in, she wasn't wearing the beige cardigan. She wore the navy blue blazer she had worn the night before. She walked with her head up, the click of her shoes echoing on the polished floor. She walked past her old cubicle in the corner. It was empty now. The files were gone. The computer was dark. It was just a desk again. She didn't stop there. She continued walking straight to the corner office with the view. The office where Greg used to sit and make phone calls. The office where he had plotted to steal the company's money. Maya unlocked the door using the master key Mr. Henderson had given her. She stepped inside and sat in the big leather chair. It felt comfortable, but it also felt heavy. She spun around once to look out the window at the city. From up here, the people below looked like ants. But she knew that every single one of those ants had a life, a family, and bills to pay. She wasn't looking down on them. She was looking out for them. There was a knock on the door. It was David, the IT guy who had helped her recover the data. "Come in," Maya said. David walked in, looking nervous. He was holding a tablet. "Good morning, Miss Sterling," he said. "I have the final numbers for the client presentation. The auditors are in the conference room. They are ready for us." "Thank you, David," Maya said, smiling at him. "Please, stop calling me Miss Sterling. It makes me feel old. Call me Maya." David's eyes widened a little, and he smiled back. "Okay, Maya. Are you ready?" "As ready as I'll ever be," she said, standing up. They walked to the conference room together. The long table was filled with people. On one side sat the auditors and the company lawyers. On the other side sat the department heads who had survived the weekend purge. Brenda and Greg's close circle were gone. They had been cleaned out on Friday afternoon. The people sitting there now looked tired but hopeful. They knew the games were over. Maya took her place at the head of the table. She didn't have a notebook full of scribbles this time. She had a clear, organized report. "We aren't here to talk about the past," Maya began, looking at everyone. "We are here to talk about the future. The fraud has been stopped. The money Greg stole is being tracked down by the authorities, but that doesn't fix the damage he did to our reputation." She clicked a button on the remote, and a screen lit up behind her. It showed a graph of the company's profits over the last year. "There was a sharp drop recently. We lost trust," Maya said. "Clients left because they felt cheated. Employees stopped caring because they felt bullied. My grandfather built this company on trust. If we want to survive, we have to earn that back." She looked at the client representative, a stern woman named Mrs. Vane who had been threatening to cancel her contract. "We are not going to hide the mistakes," Maya said to Mrs. Vane directly. "I have a new proposal for you. We will fulfill your current order at a 10% discount to make up for the delays, and I will personally oversee your account. You won't be dealing with a project manager who changes every week. You will deal with me." The room was silent. Mrs. Vane looked at Maya, studying her face. She was looking for the lie. She was looking for the slick businessman's trick. But all she saw was a young woman with honest eyes. "You?" Mrs. Vane asked. "You're the owner?" "Yes," Maya said. "And I take responsibility for what happened here." Mrs. Vane nodded slowly. "Honesty is rare in this business, young lady. I like your style. We have a deal." A collective sigh of relief went through the room. It was a small victory, but it was a start. Over the next few hours, Maya worked harder than she ever had as a temp. She listened to the department heads. She approved budgets, but she asked questions. She didn't just say yes to everything. If a number looked weird, she asked why. When she heard David explaining a new software system that would save money, she told him to go ahead and implement it at lunchtime. The office assistant ordered sandwiches for everyone. They all ate in the conference room together. It wasn't a fancy lunch. It was just ham and cheese on white bread. But for the first time in a long time, people were actually talking to each other. Maya sat with David and a woman named Alina from shipping. They weren't talking about gossip or TV shows. They were talking about work, but they were laughing. "I used to be scared to come here," Alina admitted. "Greg would yell at us if the trucks were 5 minutes late. I used to take medicine for my stomach every morning," I noticed Maya said softly. "I'm sorry you had to go through that. It's not your fault," Alina said. "You fixed it." Maya looked down at her sandwich. She realized that fixing a company wasn't just about money. It was about people. It was about making sure Alina didn't need stomach medicine just to do her job. In the late afternoon, Al went back to her office to sign some paperwork. There was a knock on the door. It was Mr. Henderson. "We just got off the phone with the police," he said. "Greg is not going to fight the charges. He knows we have everything. He's going to plead guilty." Maya nodded. She didn't feel happy about it. She didn't feel like jumping for joy. She just felt sad that it had come to this. She felt sad that a man with so much potential had thrown it all away because of greed. "He had a choice," Maya said. "We all have choices. He chose the easy way. And you chose the hard way," Mr. Henderson said. "You could have just fired him and stayed in your tower. You chose to work in the trenches. Needed to know the truth," Maya said. She stood up and walked to the window. The sun was starting to set, casting long orange shadows across the city. The lights in the office buildings were flickering on. "What are you going to do now?" Mr. Henderson asked. "Will you stay? Or will you go back to your life?" She turned around to face him. "I'm going to make some changes. We are going to start an internship program for people like me people. We're smart but don't have the fancy degrees or the rich parents. We are going to promote from within. And we are going to treat every single person with respect, even the janitors." Mr. Henderson smiled. "Your grandfather would be very proud." Maya looked around the big empty office. She thought about the simple girl in the beige cardigan who sat in the corner, afraid to speak. That girl was still inside her. She knew. She still liked simple clothes and packed lunches, but now she had a voice. She picked up her bag. She wasn't going to take the company car home. She was going to take the bus, just like she used to. She wanted to stay connected to the real world. She didn't want to forget what it felt like to be invisible. "I'll see you tomorrow, Henderson," Maya said. "Good night, Maya," he replied. Maya walked out of the office and through the main floor. The cleaning crew was arriving. Mrs. Liu was there, wiping down the desks. She saw Maya and stopped. "Boss lady," Mrs. Liu said with a big smile. "You go home early?" "Good night, Mrs. Liu," Maya said. "Take care of the place." "Always do," Mrs. Liu said. Maya stepped out of the building into the cool evening air. The city was loud and busy, but she didn't mind. She walked toward the bus stop, her steps light. She had faced the bullies. She had found the truth, and she had saved the company. But most importantly, she hadn't lost herself in the process. She was Maya, the owner of Viridia Logistics, but she was also just a girl who liked simple things. And she knew that was enough.